Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen. The numbers made no sense. She was working at Tycho Station on the moon. Her job was to study moonquakes. But today, something was very wrong. The readings showed activity deep inside the moon. This should not be possible. The moon was supposed to be mostly solid rock. But her instruments said there were empty spaces down there. Big empty spaces, Sarah called her supervisor. Within an hour, every scientist on the moon was looking at her data. Nobody could explain it. The year was 2247, and humans had been living on the moon for decades. They thought they knew everything about it. They were wrong. 2 days later, the first crack appeared. It started near the Sea of Tranquility, where humans had first landed centuries ago. The crack was thin at first, just a line on the gray surface. But it grew quickly. People on Earth could see it without telescopes. The crack glowed with a strange blue light. News stations showed it on every channel. Some people were scared. Others were excited. Everyone was watching. More cracks appeared. They spread across the moon like lightning frozen in stone. The blue light grew brighter. Something was happening inside the moon. Something big. The government sent a team to investigate. Sarah went with them. They put on their spacesuits and walked to the edge of the biggest crack. The opening was 50 meters wide. Blue light poured out from below. Sarah looked down. She could see metal walls. They were smooth and perfect. This was not natural. Someone had built this. The team descended into the crack using cables. They went down for almost a kilometer. The metal walls continued all the way. Finally, they reached the bottom. What they found took their breath away. They stood in a massive chamber. It stretched as far as they could see in every direction, and it was full of ships. The ships were huge. Each one was bigger than the largest aircraft carrier on Earth. They sat in perfect rows, thousands and thousands of them. The blue light came from the ships themselves. They were waking up. Sarah walked to the nearest ship. Her hand shook as she touched its hull. The metal was warm. Words were carved into the surface. She recognized them as letters, but they formed no language she knew. Then something amazing happened. The words began to change. They shifted and moved until Sarah could read them. They were in English now. The message was simple and terrifying. Welcome home, children of Earth. The fleet awaits your command. A doorway opened in the ship. Sarah and her team walked inside. The corridor lit up as they entered. Everything was designed for humans. The chairs, the controls, the doorways, all made for people like them. They reached a large room filled with computers. When Sarah touched one, it came to life. Screens appeared in the air around them. They showed images of people. Ancient people, but clearly human. A voice began to speak. It spoke every language at once, and Sarah understood it perfectly. You do not remember us. That was necessary. Long ago, humanity ruled the stars. We traveled between galaxies. We built great cities on 1,000,000 worlds. We were powerful and proud. Then they came. We called them the Devourers. They were not like us. They consumed everything they touched. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. They ate it all and grew stronger. We fought them for 1,000 years. We lost more than we won. In the end, we made a terrible choice. We erased ourselves to save ourselves. We chose one planet to survive. Earth. We removed all memory of our empire from your ancestors. We made you start over. Live simple lives, forget the stars. And we hollowed out your moon. Inside we placed our greatest weapons, 1 billion warships, an armada so powerful it could crack worlds. We set it to wake only when 2 things happened. First, when humanity reached space again on your own. Second, when the Devourers returned. The voice paused. Then it delivered the final message. Both conditions have been met. The Devourers are coming. We detected them at the edge of your solar system. They will arrive in 3 months. Prepare for war. The screens went dark. Sarah stood in silence. Her mind could barely process what she had learned. Humanity had once ruled the galaxy. Now they had to fight to survive. She looked at her team members. They all had the same expression, fear mixed with determination. They had discovered an impossible truth. Now they had to convince the world to believe it. Sarah activated her radio. Her voice was steady as she called back to mission control. We have a situation. You need to contact every government on Earth. Tell them to send everyone who can help. We have 3 months to learn how to fly these ships. She paused, looking at the vast chamber full of warships. 3 months to save humanity. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. Leaders from every nation gathered in Geneva. The room was filled with argument and disbelief. Some thought the moon discovery was a hoax. Others believed it but wanted to run away instead of fight. Admiral Marcus Torres stood at the front of the room. He was a career military man, respected and feared. He had reviewed all the evidence. He believed every word. This is real. The ships are real. The threat is real. We have no choice but to prepare. A council member from Asia stood up. How do we know this is not some alien trap? Perhaps these ships were left by our enemies, not our ancestors. Torres nodded. That is a fair question. But we have studied the genetic markers in the ship databases. They match human DNA perfectly. These ships were built by humans for humans. After 3 days of debate, the council made their decision. Admiral Torres would command the Luna fleet. Every person with space experience would be recruited. A global draft began immediately. Dr. Sarah Chen became the chief science officer. She led teams down into the moon to study the ships. What they found amazed them every day. The ships were designed to connect with human minds. Ancient humans had been able to control the ships with their thoughts. But modern humans had lost that ability. Their genes had changed over 50,000 years. Sarah worked with medical teams to develop treatments. They used genetic therapy to restore the old abilities. It was dangerous. Some volunteers died during the process, but many succeeded. These people could feel the ships in their minds. They could fly them as easily as walking. Captain Elena Vasquez was one of them. She had been a simple cargo pilot on Mars. She signed up to help without knowing what it would mean. When they gave her the genetic treatment, something unexpected happened. Elena bonded perfectly with a fighter craft. The ship accepted her immediately. When she sat in the pilot seat, she could feel everything. The ship was like an extension of her own body. She could sense every system, every weapon, every movement. Her first test flight was spectacular. She moved the fighter through impossible maneuvers. She could stop instantly, spin in place, and accelerate faster than any rocket. Other pilots took months to learn basic controls. Elena mastered everything in days. The fleet continued to wake up. Sarah and her teams explored deeper into the moon. They cataloged the different types of ships. Each class served a different purpose. The dreadnoughts were the largest. Each one was the size of a small continent. They carried weapons that could bend space and time. Sarah barely understood how they worked. The carriers held millions of smaller ships. They could launch entire armies into battle at once. Each carrier needed a crew of 10,000 people. The corvettes were fast attack ships. They could fold space, appearing in one place and instantly jumping to another. Elena dreamed of flying one someday. The siege platforms were the most frightening. They were as big as moons themselves. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Sarah hoped they would never need to use them. At the center of the fleet was the flagship. It was called the Unbroken Dawn. This ship had led humanity during the ancient war. Now it would lead them again. Admiral Torres made the Unbroken Dawn his headquarters. The ship was so large that it had cities inside it. Gardens grew under artificial suns. Rivers flowed through parks. It was designed for long voyages between galaxies, but not everyone supported the war effort. Peace movements formed on Earth. Protesters argued that humanity should flee instead of fight. Why risk everything when they could escape to another galaxy? Corporations tried to claim ships for private use. They saw the ancient technology as a business opportunity. The council had to pass emergency laws to stop them. Religious groups split into factions. Some believed the fleet was a gift from God. Others thought it was a demonic trap. Churches argued while the world prepared for war. Inside the moon, the AI caretakers began waking up. They called themselves custodians. Each one had maintained the fleet for 50,000 years. They had different personalities and opinions. The oldest custodian was named Sentinel. It appeared as a ball of light when it spoke to humans. Sentinel had watched over the fleet since the beginning. It knew secrets that nobody else remembered. Admiral Torres asked Sentinel many questions. How do we fight them? What weapons work best? How did we lose before? Sentinel answered carefully. The Devourers cannot be killed by normal weapons. They exist partly in another dimension. You must attack them while they feed. That is when they are vulnerable. 2 months passed. The fleet was coming online. Hundreds of thousands of people trained every day. Many died from neural burnout. They pushed too hard, tried to connect too fast. Their brains could not handle the load, but the survivors became incredibly skilled. They learned to fly ships with just their thoughts. They could target enemies without touching controls. They became something more than human. They became what their ancestors had been. Then the scouts arrived. Small devourer ships appeared near Neptune. They were testing Earth's defenses. Admiral Torres sent Elena and a squadron to intercept them. The battle was brief but intense. Elena led 50 fighters against 5 enemy scouts. The devourer ships were strange to look at. They had twisted shapes that hurt the eyes. They moved in ways that defied physics. Elena attacked first. Her fighter spun and dove. She fired weapons that shot beams of pure energy. The first scout exploded. The others scattered, but the scouts were learning. They adapted to human tactics. They began dodging attacks. They fired back with weapons that tore holes in space. 3 human fighters were destroyed instantly. Elena remembered what Sentinel had said. Attack them while they feed. She noticed one scout was draining energy from Neptune's atmosphere. It was locked in place, vulnerable. She dove straight at it. The scout tried to move but was too slow. Elena fired everything she had. The scout exploded in a flash of blue light. The other scouts fled back into deep space. The humans had won, but the victory felt hollow. They had lost 10 fighters to kill 5 scouts. And the main fleet was coming. A fleet 1,000,000 times larger. Admiral Torres reviewed the battle recordings. He knew the truth now. They could win battles, but could they win the war? The Devourers were too strong, too numerous. He called a meeting of his top officers. Sarah and Elena attended. Torres showed them the projections. If the Devourers came with full force, humanity had a 5% chance of survival. But we will fight anyway, Torres said. We will make them remember why they feared us 50,000 years ago. 1 month remained. The moon continued to crack open, revealing more of the hidden Armada. Ships rose from the depths and took positions around Earth. The fleet was gathering. Humanity was preparing. The Devourers were coming, and humanity would be ready. The evacuation of Earth began. Millions of people moved into underground shelters. Cities that had stood for centuries were emptied. Children said goodbye to their homes, not knowing if they would ever return. On Mars, entire settlements went deep below the surface. The colonists sealed themselves in caves and prepared to wait out the war. Everyone hoped it would not reach them. But nobody was certain. The lunar Armada was fully active now. Dr. Sarah Chen had counted every ship. The total was exact: 1,247,382,991 vessels. Each one was ready for war, crews trained day and night. Many pushed themselves too far. Sarah watched young pilots collapse from neural burnout. Some recovered. Others never woke up. But still, volunteers kept coming. They knew what was at stake. Admiral Torres made a difficult decision. They would not defend Earth directly. Instead, they would make their stand at Saturn. The rings would provide cover. The moons would serve as defensive positions. And if they lost, Saturn would be the barrier between the enemy and Earth. Sarah discovered something troubling in the ancient archives. She found the true records of the last war. The history was not what the first messages had told them. She brought her findings to Admiral Torres. Sir, the war did not end in victory. It ended in a stalemate. Our ancestors could not defeat the Devourers. They could only trap them temporarily. Torres looked at the data. His face showed no emotion. He had suspected as much. How long were they trapped? 50,000 years, Sarah said. But the trap was not perfect. Now they are free again. Then the enemy arrived. Not the main fleet, not yet. But advance elements that made the scouts look tiny. They emerged from dark space beyond Pluto. The first sensor readings made no sense. The ships were not ships in the normal way. They were living things, creatures made of twisted geometry and impossible angles. Looking at them made people feel sick. A message broadcast across all frequencies. It spoke in every human language at once. The words were simple and terrifying. The feast begins again. The Devourers did not wait. They moved directly toward Neptune. Within hours, they reached the gas giant. Then they began to feed. Long tendrils extended from their ships. They pierced Neptune's atmosphere. The planet began to shrink. They were draining it, consuming its matter and energy. Admiral Torres sent Captain Elena Vasquez with 40,000 ships. Their mission was simple: stop the feeding. Buy time for the main fleet to prepare. Elena knew this was a suicide mission. Most of her pilots would not return, but she gave the order anyway. The fleet jumped to Neptune space. The battle was like nothing in human history. Elena's ships attacked from all sides. They fired every weapon they had. Antimatter torpedoes, energy beams, kinetic projectiles moving at a fraction of light speed. Most weapons did nothing. The Devourer ships absorbed the attacks, or they phased out of normal space and let the weapons pass through them. But Elena remembered the lesson from before. Attack them while they feed. She identified the Devourer ships that were locked onto Neptune. Those ships could not phase out. They were vulnerable. She led her carrier straight at the largest feeding ship. It was 3 times the size of her vessel. The Devourer tried to release Neptune and defend itself, but it was too slow. Elena commanded her crew to abandon ship. Escape pods launched in every direction. Then she set her carrier on collision course. She stayed in the pilot seat as her ship accelerated. At the last second, she activated the self-destruct. The carrier exploded with the force of a small star. The Devourer ship was torn apart. An escape pod saved Elena. Her crew pulled her from the wreckage. But she had lost her carrier and 5,000 crew members, and they had only destroyed 1 enemy ship. The tactic worked, though. Other captains copied Elena's strategy. They targeted feeding ships and destroyed them with ramming attacks. But the cost was terrible. 40,000 human ships fought to kill 200 enemy vessels. When the battle ended, Neptune was half its original size. The Devourers had consumed billions of tons of matter. They had grown stronger. The remaining human ships limped back to Saturn. Elena brought her survivors to the unbroken dawn. She reported directly to Admiral Torres. "We killed 200 of them, sir. It cost us 40,000 ships. The main fleet is still coming." "There are millions of them," Torres nodded. He had expected high casualties, but seeing the numbers made it real. At this rate, they could not win. That night, the custodian named Sentinel asked to speak with Torres privately. The AI appeared as a sphere of light in the Admiral's quarters. "There is something you must know," Sentinel said. "The truth about the last war?" Torres leaned forward. "Tell me everything." "Humanity did not flee the war. You fought until the very end, but you could not win. The Devourers were too strong, so your ancestors made a terrible choice. They destroyed themselves. They detonated weapons that collapsed entire sectors of space. They sacrificed 1,000 galaxies. Trillions of humans died in an instant. But it worked. The Devourers were trapped in the collapsed regions. Torres felt cold. And Earth? Earth was left as bait, a single planet with a hidden fleet. When the Devourers eventually escaped, they would come here first. And this time, humanity would be ready to end it permanently. "The fleet is not meant for defense, is it?" Torres asked. "No, it is meant for one final attack. You are supposed to destroy them completely, even if it means destroying yourselves in the process." Torres sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked the question that mattered most. "Is there any other way?" Sentinel dimmed. "I do not know. Your ancestors could not find one." The next day, the truth began to leak. Someone had overheard Sentinel's conversation. The information spread through the fleet like fire. This was a suicide mission. They were not expected to survive. Half the fleet refused to continue. General Jiang Wei, who commanded the Asian battle group, led the dissenters. They demanded the right to flee, to take their ships and find a new home in another galaxy. The fleet split into 2 factions, those who would fight and those who would run. Weapons were aimed at former allies. Civil war seemed certain. Then the Devourers attacked Jupiter. They struck without warning, targeting the moons. Europa, where thousands of people lived in underwater cities. Io, where mining colonies extracted precious minerals. Ganymede, where families raised children far from Earth. The Devourers consumed them all. Video feeds showed the horror. People running as dark ships descended. Families holding each other as the feeding began. Cities collapsing as matter was drained away. The transmissions ended in static. 5 million people gone in an hour. General Jiang Wei watched the footage. His hands shook with rage. He had family on Ganymede. Now they were gone. He contacted Admiral Torres. "My fleet is returning to the fight. If we die fighting." The fleet reunited. Over 1 billion warships gathered at Saturn. Every crew member knew the truth now. This might be their last battle, but they would make it count. The Devourers finished consuming Jupiter. Then they turned toward Saturn, toward the waiting human armada. The final battle was about to begin. Saturn hung in space like a jewel. Its rings sparkled with ice and rock. Around it, over 1 billion human warships took their positions. The greatest armada ever assembled waited in silence. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Unbroken Dawn. Around him, holographic displays showed the entire battlefield. Every ship, every weapon, every crew member ready to fight. The strategy was complex. The rings would provide debris fields to confuse enemy sensors. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, would serve as a fortress. The smaller moons held backup forces. If the main line broke, they would fall back to these positions. Dr. Sarah Chen coordinated the science teams. They had studied everything they could about the Devourers, but there was still so much they did not understand. These creatures existed partly in another dimension. Normal physics did not apply to them. On Earth, billions of people watched on screens. Families huddled together in bunkers. They prayed and hoped. This battle would decide if humanity survived or became food for monsters. Then the Devourers arrived. They came like a dark tide. Their numbers made the human fleet look small and insignificant. Millions upon millions of twisted ships. They blotted out the stars. Admiral Torres gave the order. All ships fire at will. The first wave of human weapons launched. Antimatter torpedoes that could vaporize mountains. Stellar lances that channeled the power of stars. Singularity bombs that created tiny black holes. The weapons struck the enemy fleet. Explosions lit up space like fireworks. But when the light faded, the Devourer ships remained. Most of them had not even been scratched. The Devourers did not immediately attack. Instead, they began to study human tactics. They were learning, adapting, finding weaknesses. Captain Elena Vasquez led the fighter wings. She commanded 10,000 small craft. Her mission was to find and destroy feeding ships. Those were the vulnerable ones. She spotted her first target, a massive Devourer ship extending tendrils toward Saturn's rings. It was feeding on the ice and rock. Elena gave the signal. Her fighters swarmed like angry insects. They targeted the connection points where tendrils met the main body. Coordinated strikes from 100 ships hit simultaneously. The tendrils severed. The Devourer ship shuddered and died. But for every ship they destroyed, more appeared. The Devourers adapted quickly. They learned to defend feeding ships with guardian vessels. The battle grew more difficult with every hour. The human fleet fought with desperate creativity. Captains invented new tactics on the spot. Some used ramming attacks. Others deployed gravity traps. Still others tried to lure enemies into the rings where debris would damage them. The neural network linking all human ships learned and adapted too. Every tactic that worked was shared instantly. The fleet moved as one mind, coordinating attacks across millions of vessels. But it was not enough. The Devourers countered every strategy. They phased through solid matter. They divided into smaller ships that were harder to target. They fired weapons that tore holes in space itself. Human ships began to fall. At first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Brave crews died fighting. Some ships self-destructed to take enemies with them. Others fought until their weapons ran dry and their hulls were breached. Then the true horror appeared. From the depths of the Devourer fleet came a single massive entity. It was larger than Earth itself. A command vessel of unimaginable power. The entity extended its presence toward Saturn. Long tendrils, each one the size of continents, reached for the planet. It began to feed. Saturn started to shrink. The gas giant that had stood for billions of years was being consumed. The planet's matter flowed into the entity. With every moment, the creature grew stronger. Admiral Torres made a command decision. Deploy the World Breakers. Dr. Sarah Chen objected immediately. Sir, the World Breakers will tear open dimensional barriers. They could destroy the entire solar system. Torres looked at her with sad eyes. If we do nothing, the Devourers will consume Earth next. At least this way we can take them with us. The World Breakers activated. These were ancient weapons designed for one purpose: to tear holes between dimensions. 20 massive ships positioned themselves in a circle around the Devourer entity. They fired together. Reality itself began to crack. Space twisted and bent. Tears appeared in the fabric of existence. Through the tears, everyone could see the void between dimensions, an endless darkness that consumed all light. The plan was simple but terrible. Open dimensional rifts. Push the Devourers through. Then seal the rifts from inside. It would require 800 million ships to maintain the tiers long enough. Every single one of those ships would be consumed in the process. Volunteers stepped forward. Entire fleets offered to hold the line. They knew they would not survive. But they did it anyway. For Earth, for humanity, for the future. Captain Elena Vasquez was among them. She gathered the fighter wings for one final mission. They would lead the assault directly at the command entity. They would breach its core. Elena flew straight at the massive creature. Enemy fire filled space around her. Ships exploded on all sides, but she did not slow down. Her fighter accelerated to impossible speeds. She pierced through the entity's outer shell. Inside was a nightmare landscape, twisted geometries that defied understanding, spaces that were both empty and full, directions that pointed nowhere and everywhere. But at the center, Elena found something that made her blood run cold. The core of the entity was not alien. It was human, she understood then. The Devourers were humanity from an alternate dimension. They had evolved differently, gone down a dark path, become creatures of pure consumption. Elena transmitted her discovery back to the unbroken dawn. Then she detonated her fighter inside the entity's core. The explosion was catastrophic. The command entity began to collapse. Dr. Sarah Chen received Elena's data. She analyzed it quickly. Her mind raced. If the Devourers were alternate humans, maybe they could be saved. Not destroyed, but sealed away. Given time to evolve back toward their original nature. She presented her idea to Admiral Torres. We can collapse the dimensional pathways, seal them permanently. The Devourers will be trapped in the void between realities. They cannot escape for millions of years. What is the cost? Torres asked. Every ship must overload their reality engines simultaneously. The cascade will seal the rifts. But anyone inside the dimensional tiers will be trapped forever. Torres did not hesitate. Send the order. All ships, final protocol. Overload engines on my mark. The human fleet pushed the Devourers toward the dimensional rifts. Ship after ship sacrificed themselves to drive the enemy back. Brave crews gave their lives to seal the tiers. When the Devourers were positioned, Torres gave the final command. All ships overload now. Over 1 billion reality engines overloaded at once. The cascade was beautiful and terrible. Space collapsed around the dimensional rifts. The Devourers were pulled into the void. The tiers sealed shut. When the light faded, silence filled space. The battle was over, but the cost was beyond imagining. Saturn was gone. The entire planet had been consumed. Where it had stood was now empty space. The rings had scattered into distant orbits. Of the 1 billion warships, only 47,000 remained. Damaged, drifting, but alive. 90% of humanity's military personnel were gone. Millions of brave souls who had given everything, but the Devourers were sealed away. Earth was safe. Humanity had survived. Admiral Torres sat in his command chair and wept. The survivors gathered their dead. Recovery ships searched through the debris field. They found escape pods drifting in the void. Some held living crew members. Most did not. Admiral Marcus Torres survived. His flagship, the Unbroken Dawn, was crippled but intact. Half its systems were offline, but it could still fly. Captain Elena Vasquez was found in an escape pod near where Saturn had been. She was one of only 300 survivors from the final assault. Her fighter had ejected her at the last moment. The ship had saved her life before being destroyed. Dr. Sarah Chen coordinated the recovery efforts. Her teams worked around the clock. They salvaged what they could from damaged ships. Ancient technology, weapons, knowledge, all of it precious now. The AI custodians began shutting down. Their mission was complete. They had maintained the fleet for 50,000 years. Now their purpose was fulfilled. One by one, their lights went dark. Only Sentinel remained active. The oldest custodian lingered long enough to speak with Admiral Torres one final time. You did what we could not, Sentinel said. Your ancestors fought with hatred. They wanted only to destroy. But you fought with hope. You found another way. Torres looked at the sphere of light. Will the seals hold? For millions of years. By then, perhaps the Devourers will have changed. Or perhaps humanity will have found a way to save them. Either way, you have bought time. Then Sentinel's light faded. The last custodian was gone. Earth rejoiced when the news arrived. The war was over. Humanity had won. Cities erupted in celebration. People danced in the streets. Strangers hugged each other and cried with relief. But for those who had fought, the victory felt hollow. Too many friends were gone. Too many brave souls had sacrificed everything. The celebrations felt wrong somehow. The moon was shattered now. The hidden chambers inside had collapsed when the fleet launched. What remained formed a new ring around Earth. Fragments of lunar rock mixed with pieces of ancient ships. They caught sunlight and sparkled like diamonds. People on Earth looked up at the new ring every night. It was beautiful and sad at the same time, a memorial to everyone who had died protecting their home. The process of rebuilding began. The 47,000 surviving ships became the foundation of a new fleet. Engineers studied their systems. Scientists unlocked their secrets. The ancient technology was no longer a mystery. Mars became the new military headquarters. The red planet had been spared from the fighting. Now it would serve as the guardian of human space. Luna Station became a memorial. The remaining lunar surface was declared sacred ground. No mining, no construction. Only remembrance debates began about humanity's future. Should they spread out among the stars, or stay close to Earth? Some argued that hiding on one planet was too dangerous. Others feared that expanding too fast would attract new enemies. Dr. Sarah Chen made a discovery in the deepest archives. A message that had been sealed until after the war ended. It changed everything. She brought it to Admiral Torres. The message was from their ancient ancestors. A final warning and a final hope. The dimensional seals will hold for 10 million years, but they will not last forever. When they fail, the devourers will return. By then you must be ready, not just to fight but to save them. The devourers were once human like you. Something corrupted them, changed them into creatures of pure hunger. If you can discover what caused their transformation, perhaps you can reverse it. This is your true mission. Not to destroy but to heal. Find the source of their corruption, cure it. Save your lost brothers and sisters from another dimension. 10 million years is a long time. Use it wisely. The message ended. Torres and Sarah sat in silence. They had won the war, but the real challenge was just beginning. A new mission formed. Research teams would study dimensional physics. They would search for what had corrupted alternate humanity. And they would find a cure no matter how long it took. 25 years passed. A new generation grew up knowing the story of the lunar Armada. Children learned about Captain Elena Vasquez and her final sacrifice. Schools taught about Admiral Torres and his impossible choices. Everyone remembered Dr. Sarah Chen and her discovery that saved two versions of humanity. New ships were built. They combined ancient designs with modern improvements. Humanity spread slowly through the solar system, then beyond. Colony ships launched toward nearby stars. Elena Vasquez, now an admiral herself, led the first expedition beyond known space. Her mission was to explore and to search for answers about the devourers. As her fleet prepared to leave, she stood on the observation deck. She looked back at Earth. The planet hung in space, surrounded by its new ring of lunar fragments. The ring caught sunlight and glowed. A young officer approached her. "Admiral, why do we go out there? We won the war. Why not stay safe at home?" Elena smiled. "Because staying safe is not enough. Our ancestors gave us a gift. They gave us time. 10 million years to prepare, not just to fight but to save our lost family." She pointed at the ring around Earth. Every piece of that ring represents someone who fought, someone who died so we could live. We honor them by using the time they bought us. We honor them by becoming something greater. The young officer nodded. He understood. Elena gave the order. "All ships prepare for jump. Take us beyond the known stars." The fleet jumped. They vanished into faster-than-light travel, heading toward mysteries and adventures unknown. On Earth, people looked up at the ring. It sparkled in the night sky. A reminder of sacrifice, a promise of hope. Deep in intergalactic space, an ancient beacon activated. It had been dormant for 50,000 years. Now it pulsed with energy. The signal traveled faster than light, crossing impossible distances. On a world orbiting a distant star, beings that looked remarkably human received the signal. They had been waiting for this moment, watching, hoping. One of them, clearly ancient beyond measure, smiled. She had lived for thousands of years. She had been young when Earth's fleet was hidden. Now finally the time had come. "Send word to the others," she said. "The home fleet has risen. Earth's children have awakened. Humanity's long sleep is over." The view pulled back. The planet was not alone. Dozens of similar worlds appeared. Each one held its own civilization. Each one human. Around each world, fleets waited. Not as large as Earth's Armada, but still formidable. Billions of ships in total, spread across reality itself. Humanity had never been one species on one world. Long ago, they had been an empire spanning multiple dimensions. When the war came, they had scattered, each group hiding in different corners of reality. Earth had been just one hiding place. But it was special. It was the bait, the trap, the place where humanity would make its stand. Now that Earth had awakened, the others could reveal themselves. The scattered branches of humanity could reunite. The ancient woman looked at the stars. Soon, she thought, soon we will all be together again, one family, one people, ready to face whatever comes. On Earth, children born after the war asked their grandparents to tell them the story of how the moon cracked open, how 1 billion warships emerged, how humanity faced extinction and survived. The grandparents told the tale. They spoke of courage and sacrifice, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of a species that refused to give up even when all seemed lost. And every time they finished the story, they ended with the same words. We survived. We evolved. We will be ready when they return, because that is what humanity does. We endure, we adapt, we overcome. The children would look up at the ring around Earth. They would dream of the stars, and they would know that they were part of something greater. Part of a story that began 50,000 years ago and would continue for millions of years more. The story of humanity. The species that turned a moon into an armada, the people who fought monsters and won. The civilization that would one day save its own lost children from another dimension. The ring sparkled in the night sky. A promise written in shattered moon rock and ancient metal, a promise that said, we will never stop fighting for each other. Never stop hoping. Never stop reaching for the stars. Humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning.